Good morning to each and every one of you. I'm Janet, and I'm going to be offering you the address this morning. It's fascinating to me to realize that each person hearing my words this morning will hear them differently. Or not dramatically so, but there will be considerable differences in each individual's interpretation of my words. The reason for this, of course, is that each one of us is unique. I believe even identical twins have different fingerprints. And our uniqueness is, or should be, apparent at every level of our being: physical, emotional, and mental. Efforts to conform really don't work with us humans. We see this as children grow into adulthood and often reject the ideals and standards of their parents. Quite often, for a brief period during adolescence, there is a time when conformity with one's peers is a goal. But this sort of conformity rarely endures into maturity. What has long puzzled me is that when it comes to something as intimate as faith, the religions of the world insist on conformity, of practice, and even of belief. I utterly fail to see how this can possibly work for anyone. Surely our faith, or lack of, is completely individual, based not only on our personal experiences, but even more on our responses or reactions to these experiences. Of course, we'll have a response or a reaction when we hear of other people's experiences, and this can and probably will either be coloured by our own previous similar experience, or will in the future colour our own response or reaction if a similar experience should come to us. The greatest part in establishing our faith lies with our minds, and in spite of appearances, and in spite of every effort to program them, each person's mind remains unique. So it follows that for each of us, whatever we read or whatever we hear will be processed according to our own unique understanding. This is absolutely as it should be, of course, and I find it wonderful that no two of us understands truth in precisely the same terms, and no two of us will ever hear something like this morning's talk identically. There are vast numbers of books and recordings about teachings of truth, ways and means of finding truth, or salvation or ascension, and while many of them are similar, each is more or less different from the others. So which is really teaching truth? I'd say that each and every single one is teaching the truth as understood by its author. What else could anyone possibly teach? As one of my guides once said, everything that comes through a human instrument is contaminated by that instrument's mind. And just because their truth isn't the same as mine or yours, it doesn't make them wrong, or us wrong either. What it ought to do is help and encourage us to examine our own understanding, to discover if they have something to offer which we might choose to embrace as our own. I was once advised by a very wise lady to embrace any offered wisdom that felt absolutely right, to reject any that felt totally wrong in any way, and to file away at the back of my mind for later consideration anything I wasn't sure about. Useful advice. I cannot emphasize too strongly the unwisdom of trying to adopt another person's understanding, whatever it might be, and however expressed or received by others. If it belongs to someone else, it can never sit perfectly within your own understanding. Much like borrowing someone else's shoes, it can never work with real comfort. I'm very aware that over the centuries, individual thought has rarely been encouraged. Sometimes it's been actively discouraged. But please allow your minds to fulfill their function. They're for thinking, dear people, not for mimicking. We're well and truly into the age of Aquarius, the age of the mind. And this all too often underused muscle needs to be brought into full use and become strong so that it can serve us as it has always been intended to serve us. Probably at no time in our past has it been more imperative that we use our thinking minds as fully as we possibly can, and use them to build and cement our faith. Some of you know that it's not possible to love God and experience fear. The two are mutually incompatible. When I say love God, I mean love in the fullest possible sense of the word. The love that includes absolute trust in the beloved. Dear ones, we are essentially aspects of God manifesting in physical form upon our glorious physical earth. How could anyone seriously think that God would harm itself? A God that is all wisdom, all love, and all power, that would damage or hurt itself? It makes no sense to me, but to a great number of people it appears that it does make sense. Fear is corrosive, and to my mind, more potentially harmful than any physical virus could ever be. What is the worst that a virus can do to us? For a very small percentage of those who succumb to COVID-19, physical death will be the outcome. Well, we've all experienced physical death many times, and so far it hasn't killed us, has it? We've all reincarnated many, many times. So obviously death isn't the worst that can happen to us. I'd suggest that fear is far more to be feared, because it seems to shut down the human mind and block it off from logical, rational, and even sensible thought. It certainly blocks us off from God awareness. Personally, I can conceive of nothing worse than that. When I see the fear that is currently dominating so many people's thinking, I could weep. It manifests in many damaging ways, not the least of which is depression, which is currently a hugely widespread plague. I'm sure fear is probably as contagious as the coronavirus, if not more so. Faced with the possibility of becoming physically sick, the sensible course of action is to strengthen and reinforce our immune systems. Yes? But when we're offered the virulent germ called fear, why do so many people shelve the responsibility of thinking about it and simply join the herd? The media is full of reports, pronouncements, statistics, prognostications, and every conceivable fear-mongering tool that a malign ingenuity can dream up. but I still see no reason to either believe them all or fall into the fear trap. Be aware that what we focus our minds on, we draw to ourselves with interest. And in this, fear is like a crowbar that can and will open all sorts of horrible doors. Fear brings no peace of mind, no contentment, and certainly no happiness. It only disturbs and disrupts. In this state, our minds can't operate effectively. So much wiser, surely, to focus on love. And if fearful niggles persist, which they might well, use the power of the mind to send them away, overcome, indeed routed, by thoughts of all the amazingly wonderful things that life has offered. Concentrate your thoughts on the wonders of God's world, on the beauties, the joys that are part of life here on the earth. Remember, love and fear cannot be together in the same mind. If you're willing to aim for an absence of fear in your life, it's surely worth working towards. For many, it might not come easily, because old habits don't just fade away. But this is no reason not to try. As a footnote, it's important to remember that we, humanity, have created the chaos in which we're now living. For eons of time, our selfish, unthinking thoughts, words, and actions have systematically created the energies that none of us is currently enjoying. Let nobody even think of the possibility of returning to the good old days. They've proved to be far from good. Let's rather use the power of our minds to recreate, to bring in a golden future, one where people show respect for one another and for life in its wholeness, a caring future, above all a loving future, and most of all, a future where we share consciously in the godness that we are. Thank you, everybody. Be blessed.